Welcome, welcome. Rod, I just want to say thank you so much for joining me today for this conversation we're going to have about some of the changes that you've made in your accounting firm. And before we even get started, please just share a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Well, my name is Rodney Kautz, and I am an enrolled agent. I have a practice in Carlsbad, California, and I specialize in businesses. I also do individuals, estates, and trust, and I have a small bookkeeping business that goes along with my practice.
We've known each other now for a couple months and wanted to really get some insights as to what were things like with your accounting firm before we actually met and started working together.
Well, I think one of my biggest problems, Lauren, was that I was not charging enough for the work that I was doing. And I think the reason was because I wasn't very effective at presenting the value that I was giving to my clients. I knew I had this value, but I really didn't have a way of conveying that value to those clients. So as a process, I left a lot of money on the table, unfortunately. And if I only had that time back to fix that problem, I'd have more money in my bank.
Okay, and this is a really common problem, is that I feel accounting professionals just like you make such a big difference for their clients, but having the right words or knowing how to present it in a way that makes sense to that potential client sometimes feels very, very difficult.
Yeah, and we're so busy in our businesses that we don't take a moment to step back and think about this and realize we need to address this issue. It's such a huge issue. And so each year, time just goes by and by and by, and you're in the same situation.
But eventually what happened for you is that you decided that you did want to fix this and you looked for help. What contributed to the decision of us working together?
Well, I had been going year in, year out, producing identical results for my business, and the demands of my clients were increasing. And so I was spending more time, I was bringing them more value, and I wasn't charging for it. And again, because I really wasn't sure how to set my rates. And so I had gone to a number of webinars and tried to learn the topic. And then I took a webinar by you, and in the process, you really laid out a great solution that I thought was very hands-on. And that was really what was important to me, was I needed a hands-on approach to working with somebody to solve this problem. And all it took was one interview with you or one session with you privately to realize that you had the solution for me, because I needed that hands-on approach.
Well, one of the things I think happens, and to all of us, including me, that you mentioned, Rod, is that we know what the problem is and we know what we want the solution to be, the outcome, but sometimes we just don't know how to do it. And that's where we end up getting stuck. And it sounds like that's what was happening for you, is the scope creep, where you were doing more work without compensation.
A continuous, it was just, and the scope creep was getting worse and worse and worse. And I really wasn't familiar with the need. I wasn't good at setting boundaries.
Mm-hmm. As a customer service profession, boundaries is difficult because we need our clients in order to have a business. So I totally get it. But I wanted to also say one of the toughest challenges is really raising your rates. You might be thinking about it for a long time, but actually thinking about it and doing it are two different things. So how long was this on your mind for?
I had thought about this for about 3 years. Like I said, I was always busy. I wasn't dedicating the time I should have to fixing this problem. And the bottom line is I was taking care of everyone but myself, unfortunately. And my bottom line was shrinking. And I knew that running my business the same way just was not going to be a sustainable proposition if I wanted to achieve the goals that I had set for myself. So it took me about 3 years of thinking about it, and probably a year, a little bit less than a year, I would say a summer of searching for a solution before I came across you.
Mm-hmm. Part of what you're talking about is that journey that we go on before we actually take action to solve a problem. Is we become aware that we have a problem, then we get caught up in research. And research, as you said, took you about 3 years or so. And then seriously thinking about it was an additional 12 months. And then finally you hit that tolerance limit and you go ahead and you step in and you make the investment. Now, were there some obstacles that maybe came up for you when you were making that decision to invest in my services and for us to work together?
Oh, sure. The number one was myself. I thought that I could solve the problem on my own by reading and doing all those kind of things. Like I say, I lost a lot of time and money thinking that way, unfortunately. Then I wasn't sure if I could justify the investment. But when I sat down with you and you explained your system and you explained to me really that I was not the only person that was facing this problem, is what it boils down to. In my mind, I knew that I couldn't not make this investment. I guess if I'm saying that correctly, I knew I had to make this investment after talking to you. And again, I needed that hands-on coaching approach, and you were very relatable. And so really, it was, I was trying to solve it on my own, and I wasn't sure if I could justify the investment, but I had to understand what that investment was going to reap. And that was when the conversation with you happened. And then it became very evident to me why I wanted to proceed with you.
And I appreciate that. I know that when I'm in similar situations, Rod, part of what I've discovered is when I'm looking at working with someone and making that investment, which feels scary because it's a stretch. Now there's skin in the game. You have to not just trust the other person, you have to trust yourself that you're going to do the work too. But once I make that investment, I found that there's some relief that comes from having finally taken that next step. What was your experience like once you finally took the plunge and decided to hop on board?
Well, it freed up some of my time for sure, because I stopped searching the way that I had spent so much time searching. And then I felt like I finally had that direction that I was seeking desperately, I guess is the best way to put it. So I had this relief finally that I could take a breath and then immerse myself into the system so that I could achieve what it is I wanted to achieve. So it was actually a sense of relief that I finally had some direction.
That's been my experience as well. So I want to get into the nitty-gritty a little bit. Let's dive into some of the specific strategies which you've done to improve your bottom line.
Well, first off, I used to bill by time. And the problem with that is that time penalizes you for being efficient. And that was, I think, the first thing that you brought to the attention when we started working together. So I tried to gravitate away from that, or I worked immediately on starting to gravitate away from that and building confidence then, because this is kind of a multi-step approach. The first one is you have to understand that maybe your billing system isn't working, and then you have to build the confidence that you can charge what it is that you should be charging, that recognizes the value that you're bringing to the equation. And the other thing is that I used to offer discounts, and that was like just shooting myself in the foot continuously. And you really worked with me to understand that I was giving away value if I was working in that type of an environment. So I had to do away with the discounts. And
Go ahead.
I just finished my first tax season with working your system. I'm not even through the season, and I improved my gross profit by 40%. So clearly the investment has paid for itself.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that, because as you know, I love numbers. And part of now that you started to talk about, okay, you're no longer charging for time because you get punished for your expertise and efficiency and technology, then how do you now analyze and quote projects if you're not looking at how much time it's going to take?
Well, the first thing is I shut up. And what I mean by that is this, that I used to, my client would come to me, they'd kind of present to me a situation, I would just blurt out a price, all right? I hadn't really thought about through the process because I was just trying to overcome the resistance that I thought that they would give me if I quoted them a price for my service. What I do now is I break that whole process down into specific steps, and I charge for each one of those steps. So now I'm not giving away my time the way that I used to give away. I'm actually being recognized for, or I'm being remunerated for that work that I'm doing for the client anyways. And each one of those steps ultimately has the goal of getting to the final point of presenting to the client a solution to whatever the problem is that they've presented to you or the reason why they want to work with you. And you have the confidence to have built up to recognize it's going to take this much work, and I'm going to bring this much value. And so here's what the price is going to be to do this. So I think monetizing each one of those steps has been really invaluable in helping my practice.
Can you share maybe one thing that you used to give away for free that now you're getting compensated for and clients are paying you to do?
Well, one would be if a client comes to me with QuickBooks as an example, and they say, I think my books are a mess. I'd love you to take a look at those. And I would just say, okay, send them over and we'll take a quick look. Now I present to them a proposal. It's called Cleanup Project. And I give them a very specific dollar amount because I know whatever time I think it's going to take, it generally takes twice the amount of time. And so you have to understand in your mind, let's make sure we start up front that we're going to be properly compensated for the work that we're going to do. And so I think that's a perfect one, a cleanup project in QuickBooks.
I appreciate you sharing that. And talking about, that's an example of new clients coming to you now. Let's kind of pivot and look at those current clients, especially the legacy ones that have been with you from the very beginning. How did you go ahead and maybe increase the value of those clients? And did you get the resistance that you expected?
Well, the first thing is I upped my minimum fee. I was kind of stuck. I was going on the hourly rate type system, which equated into a certain amount for the average tax return. And I just set a floor that I wasn't going to do a tax return for less than that amount. And that's whether it's a really simple return or not. It's about the value you have here. The second thing is I stopped discounting, because discounting is really just, to me, telling the client, I've got this fee, but I'm not really worth it. And that was really painful when I recognized the fact that I had those discounts out there. Did I get some pushback? I think the better way to put it is, were my clients really aware of what the value was that I was bringing to them? And so in the process of raising the rate, I was also making sure to explain to them that what I was delivering to them with my product was very valuable to them. And so that overcame most of the pushback that I had from any clients who did, which was really not a large number.
And part of what you really get into the essence of that I want to highlight is you found the right words to be able to communicate the value. And really, once you were able to do that, everything else kind of fell into place.
True, very true.
Tell me some of the things that you did maybe to fine tune your system, which I know is something that we're still working on together, is creating better workflow and processes, but about fine tuning your system as well as growing your income.
Well, the first thing is when you get into this system, you will recognize that this approach is always evolving, because what you learn, you then reapply. And then when you reapply, you refine. And so this system, it's always moving in the right direction. And so you have to understand, you don't just step into it. If you step into it and it's successful, but what you gain from the knowledge of this will evolve over time, and you'll get better and better at the system. The other thing is the group meetings that you gave, Lauren, or that you produce, you're interacting with your fellow professionals and you're hearing the issues that they're having and how they're trying to solve them, and you have input for them and they have input for you. And so you have this whole symbiotic relationship that is really beneficial to me. I'm seeking to improve my standardization of how I approach an engagement, because when you standardize that process, it builds confidence. You're not grasping to try and make that presentation to the client. Now what you're doing is you've got a system down and you're presenting the system, and it's up to the client whether they want to accept that proposal or not accept that proposal. But under this system that you've helped me develop, I've got much more confidence in presenting that. And like I say, it's a standardized approach. And as you do it over and over and over again, you get better at that presentation, at that process.
I always get amazed that people go through a business school when they're getting their training. I mean, accounting is all about the money, but they never ever teach you how to do the enrolling part, to price your services, and they just expect you to wing it. So having a system gives you freedom. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, and I would agree with that 100%, Lauren.
Tell me about some of the hurdles that you faced and that you were able to overcome.
Well, like I said, my biggest hurdle was myself, because I didn't have the confidence to ask for the price that recognized the value I was bringing to the relationship, because I wasn't aware how to do it, is what it boils down to. And so I was very ineffective at presenting myself to my clients. I was just kind of spurting out, here's what I can bring to you. And it maybe wasn't what the client wanted to hear. And so I spent a lot of time selling myself, and then I was underpricing my services. Now I'm a listener, and your system has taught me to be a listener. And when I listen, I'm trying to pinpoint the things. What are the pain points that the client is bringing to me, or the prospective client is bringing to me? And in that listening process, in my mind, I'm formulating responses that are geared around the system that I have created to address those issues. I'm trying to figure out, as they're saying their issue, okay, which part of my puzzle fits into the equation that's going to work with them. The other thing is, I used to take almost any client, I took pretty much any client that came through the door. No longer, because now I'm looking for those clients that fit with the way that I want to run my practice, and that includes how I'm going to price my services. And so it does mean that I don't take everybody, and sometimes I get turned down, but I don't take it personally any longer, because I know there's a whole range of people out there that want to work with me, and they'll eventually will come together.
I think that, first of all, I want to say boundaries are great. They protect you, which is why I really encourage you having them in place. And because the fact that you're now cherry picking a client, more selective, have you found that you're actually ending up with different types of clients than you originally had?
Oh, very much so. The sophistication of my clients continues to increase. I have a good reputation with several investment advisors, and so they send me some of their more difficult clients because they know that I've got the skill set to do this. And I'm very effective at presenting to my clients now the fact that I'm their person to address their issues.
You said that with confidence, and you owned it. I just want to acknowledge that, Ron. So that is great to see. Okay, so now we've been talking a lot about value. How do you, because you know how to value price your work and the service that you offer, what's different for your business?
Well, let's start with, I'm making more money. And that's a really good part. And it's not about gouging, it's about being recognized for the value that you're bringing to your clients. The other thing is I'm working on my service offering, business service offerings to gear more towards those type of clients that I'm seeking. And so the kind of services that I'm offering to my clients are increasing, I guess is the best way to put it. And so I'm really adjusting my business continuously so that I'm hitting my target market.
I think that part of what I've seen for you, Rod, over the last couple months is you've shifted the emphasis from being a technician into being an advisor.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, you're really working with them at a higher level and showing them that you come with the advisory part first, and you happen to meet their accounting needs as well.
Correct. Yeah, that's a great way to put it, Lauren. Great way to put it.
Anything else that you feel is important to mention, noteworthy?
Well, if you're thinking about this system, the first thing you have to recognize is you already have clients in your portfolio who fit in this system. And you'll be surprised that if you make adjustments, they might say to you, you know, what took you so long? We recognized this a while ago. You have to know how to present this system so that it ends up being a win-win for all parties. I win, the client wins because I'm bringing them more value is what it boils down to. And your clients, when you're finally able to explain to them the value that you're bringing to the equation, and it's in most cases, it's what you've been doing all along. It's just you've never been able to communicate. You haven't been effective at communicating it to your client. Your clients will really appreciate it when they finally bring into focus the fact that you're doing so much for them and you're bringing so much value for them. And learning to be choosy is also a really great thing because you find those clients that don't drag you down is what it boils down to.
From all the things that you shared, I hear a couple of things that you've mentioned that have made a difference is first, you were able to understand your value. And once you were able to really see where the value was, it made it easier to communicate that to your clients.
Absolutely.
You shifted how you approached initial consultations, where you're no longer trying to sell them or focus on just the technical parts, but really position yourself as a consultant, advisor, and coming from the place where you don't feel like you need everybody. It's okay if not everybody says yes to you.
That is correct.
And then the third part was understanding how to separate your fees from time in order to be more profitable, increase your revenues, and have clients that really appreciate and respect what you do, as opposed to those headache clients that treat you like an employee. They don't respect you. They challenge your invoice.
Yes. Yeah. What's your charge going to be is no longer a price. Now it's, well, let's talk about what your needs are and how what I can do can help you solve that. I've totally taken that conversation away from what are you going to charge. That's very freeing and it's very satisfying.
And if somebody wants to reach out to you, get in touch, what's the best way for them to do that?
Best way for them to do that would be to send me an email. The email address is rod.couts, COUTS, @seasideresources.com.
Rod, I appreciate you sharing about your journey on how you've been able to raise your value and work with your clients at a higher level than you previously did. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to do so, Lauren.